Okay. So last week I was asked to talk about improving ourselves or changing ourselves from a Buddhist perspective, because I asked everyone if you have a theme or topic, and of course the person who asked me to talk about it is not here. That's how it almost always goes. It's really weird. I've noticed a pattern. But anyhow, so first of all, as you've noticed from doing that meditation from yourself as a baby and 5 years old and 18 years old, and now that you have changed, have you noticed that? We've changed a lot, and in a lot of ways we have improved. So I'm not going to say that we can't improve ourselves, right? We can change, we can grow, we can evolve, we can do a lot of things. But I think it's also important to mention that the Western society or Western values point out, our marketing points out all of our inadequacies, and then portrays that we're supposed to look a particular way, we're supposed to act a particular way, we're supposed to be this perfect version, we're supposed to be youthful for the rest of our lives and beautiful, intelligent. We're supposed to be successful. We're supposed to be kind, generous, non-judgmental, and accepting of every. Does any of this sound familiar? You have to have a higher education and on and on and on. And because of all these messages that we're receiving of what we're supposed to look like and how we're supposed to act and who we're supposed to be, we can easily get stuck and overwhelmed in this wheel of what I call the wheel of samsara, which is, the Buddha calls it about the wheel of being born and reborn and born and reborn. But in this lifetime, we can get stuck in the wheel of samsara of self-improvement and seeking to perfect ourselves. And this is coming from a place of inadequacy. We're never enough. We're never, when we compare ourselves to some, ideal way that we're supposed to be, we're never going to ever meet it, So it's going to be a lifetime of trying and failing and feeling really inadequate. So to me, that's an unwholesome motivation for changing and improving. The other thing is I looked up about, are we wired to change ourselves? Are we wired to improve ourselves in any way? And there's, what I found is scientifically, they're saying it's very important to understand that we are wired with an intuitive drive to learn, to grow, and evolve. And that this ancient wiring is wired in us as part of our survival mechanism so that humans were able to find new solutions to problems that arose that our previous generations didn't have to deal with. So we can adapt, we can learn, and we can grow and adapt to different changing situations. So this intuitive drive it's wired into us to want to evolve and grow and learn, which is helpful to know, isn't it? It's like, why? Anyhow, but this is also at the root of a lot of our dissatisfaction, right? Especially if we have an unrealistic ideal of how we need to be or how we need to change. But it's really good. I know that when I'm challenging myself to do something that I'm inspired or that I really value and taking a leap and trying something new, whether I fail or not, I usually feel pretty good that I've tried something new. The bloodstream, the circulation gets higher, the interest, you notice a lot of things that you wouldn't notice normally, when we're in our habitual state of mind. So I think that we get positive feedback when we take risks and do new things and grow in different ways, usually. But this changing ourselves, this improving ourselves, from a Buddhist or mindfulness standpoint, we want it to come from a wholesome motivation. This intuitive, creative drive is a wholesome motivation. It's coming from within ourselves. Oh, I really want to try this. It feels right for me. Whereas before it's, oh, I need to get better at this, and I need to get better at that, and I suck at this, and if only I was like Irene in certain ways, or someone else that we might know, right? I can give you an example for myself. I've never been a naturally organized person. I've been a naturally disorganized person, ADD, and every so often I'll look at my kitchen table, I'm like, where'd all this stuff come from? And I have to go and, clean it up. And because now I have the wholesome motivation to be organized and clean, because it feels better when things aren't as cluttered. But it's not natural for me, right? So I have to stop myself every so often and go, okay, where does this go? Remember, you're committed to non-cluttering, you're committed to feeling more free. It's a wholesome motivation. Whereas before I used to beat myself up and go, why are you so disorganized? Why can't you be neat and clean like your ex-husband? Or I've just seen that some people, it's really natural for them. They just naturally do this. And other people, it's a real struggle. Read every Get Organized book, every efficiency book that there is. You better believe I've done it. I've tried every single program. But this, in some way, I have seen some improvement, but I've also had to let myself off the hook. I will continue to want to improve in this area, but it's not natural for me. I'm not wired this way. So little slow improvements I have to celebrate. Yeah? Anyhow, so some ways we can change. Some ways we can't, is what I'm trying to say. Or we can only improve incrementally. But with certain personality, certain wiring, I'm not going to wake up tomorrow and be the neatest, most organized person in the world. Yeah. In fact, I've learned, and my daughter, she just came to stay with me, and she was leaving stuff everywhere. And I was like, you're just like me. Anyhow, whereas another member of the family is not like that at all. And she said, yeah, but I know where everything is. And I think to myself, I'm very organized in my disorganized way. I know where everything is. I can usually find everything. It might look disorganized and cluttered, and I run a lot of programs, and I've, taught hundreds of people, and how could I do that if I didn't have some level of organization? It just doesn't look the way society wants it to look, right? Buddhism tells us that change is possible. We're not stuck with what we have, particularly our fear-based thinking mind, right? Our desire-seeking mind. We're going to have tendencies to be more fear-based or more desire-seeking or more angry. Buddhism teaches we can purify this mess. You may not have a mess, but just in case you do, we can purify and we can improve this mess between our ears, just to a certain degree. But what actually gets purified? And what changes? And how does it change? Yeah. So there are a lot of things that can change. I've noticed through my own practice over the 30 some years, we can change our perspectives. We can change the way we look at things. Things when I was younger, I would, set in stone, this would never change, this is who I am, blah, blah, blah. I've noticed, this has been a huge change, right? We can become more realistic and congruent with facts when we're paying attention, because this practice is about paying attention on purpose in the present moment with kindness, right? Well, when we do that, we start to see the way life actually is, not the way we want it to be, not idealism. So on one side of the spectrum, idealism is unhealthy, where we're turning everything into something perfect, or when we're really negative and seeing everything as a disaster. So these two sides of the spectrum are unhealthy. But what we can do is we can look at something, we can see the positive and negative, all the different aspects of each situation. So we see it realistically, right? So we tend to let go of idealism and fatalism the more we practice. Yeah. We see our patterns where we're blindly seeking pleasure. Some people do a lot more pleasure seeking, whereas other people do a lot more avoiding pain, just impulsively, without any wisdom. And we see with our practice that the more we do this, avoiding the unpleasant and seeking the pleasant, the more our suffering increases tremendously. The Buddha taught that, right? Yeah, first and second noble truth. So when we do this practice, we also see all the different ways we create suffering for ourselves and others. Anybody notice that? Yeah? It can be very sobering when you first start your practice. I know when I first started, I was like, oh my gosh, I am such a mess. I didn't hear that expression up north, by the way. That's a southern thing. I learned this expression down here. She's a mess. I was like, a what? A mess. I was like, oh, that's me. I'm a mess. Anyhow. Yeah, and the Buddha also taught us that we can set our intention to change these really negative habit patterns, the difficult ones that brings us more suffering. He also taught that change is an inherent part of our existence. His teaching was that everything is constantly changing, right? That we're not static. We're constantly changing. That everything's impermanent and changing. And if we can see this clearly, then we're not going to get stuck in a certain way. We can have hope that there's maybe hope that we can change in certain ways. And he encouraged us to reflect on the wholesome things, to bring mindfulness to the wholesome and the unwholesome, to let go of the unwholesome habits, and to choose the wholesome habits of mind. Right? So we can intentionally do this through practice, moment to moment practice. But before we even start, we first have to understand the need to change or the need to improve. Yeah, a lot of people. Somebody was just telling me today about a friend of theirs who they have these big blowout arguments or breakdowns in their relationship, but her friend will never admit her part of the breakdown, will never take responsibility for her having unrealistic expectations, et cetera. So this person, her friend, she loves and chooses to keep forgiving her and accept her the way she is not willing to do that for her. You know what I mean? Because she doesn't see her pattern. She doesn't see her habitual patterns. She doesn't see the suffering she's causing. She also doesn't see the need to change. So if we don't see a need to change a certain habit or some way that's unhelpful, then we're just going to perpetually create suffering for ourselves and others, right? So we have to have, we have to see how we're blaming others and being a victim, our patterns, how we're feeling powerless and the need to feel powerless. So then we create other people into perpetrators, or feeling superior might be our habit of mind, where we have to put other people down to feel better about ourselves. A really big habit pattern that a lot of people have, particularly in the West, because it's been conditioned out of us, is being vulnerable. We're taught that vulnerability equals weakness. And As a therapist, I've heard people say, God knows, if anybody knew what a big mess, how screwed up I was, how I really feel. And I'm like, yeah, and I'm the only one that feels that way. Most people believe they're the only ones that, they're the most uniquely screwed up ones, and they're more screwed up than everybody else, and no one else feels this way. Everyone else is happy and going along. Anybody ever felt that way? Right? Yeah. That's delusion. A lot of people really want us to stay stuck. They want to stay stuck in whatever the beliefs they're having, or maybe for years I was stuck because I was afraid of failure, so I wasn't taking risks for fear of failure. And I got over that. Like, better to try and fail than never to do anything. Yeah. So once we see the need to change, we have to identify all our unwholesome patterns. Sometimes we've seen them, but now we really want to delve into them and explore them, become curious about them. When do I tend to make myself inferior or superior, or what situations am I avoiding? What situations am I striving for? When do I tend to crave? What do I tend to crave? All these different things. Become a connoisseur of your habit patterns, so that when they're right, you can be ready for them. Yeah. For instance, if someone was coming to visit you and they told you, I'm coming Thursday to visit, this Thursday, next Thursday, you're going to be ready for them. You're going to be like, okay, here they're coming. I'm going to buy groceries or whatever I need to host them. Whereas if you don't know anything about that they're coming, they'll just show up unawares and you'll be like, oh my gosh, I didn't know you were coming. Same with our unwholesome patterns. We want to see them clearly. Yeah. And so that we can be ready for them when they come. And then when they come, we want to bring mindfulness to them. Yeah. We want to feel how that desire or fearing or resistance or whatever our pattern is, judging, how that feels in the body, where it's located, how much tension does it bring, what emotions are co-arising, what are we believing about ourselves right then that's not true? What are we believing about others that's not true? People pleasing is a big pattern. Anybody had that one? I think just about everyone raised their hands here. Yeah, people pleasing, desire to be liked, and so we lose contact with ourselves in order to try to please others. So if I'm a recovering people pleaser. So when someone's asking for volunteers for something in one of the groups I'm in, I'll sit back. Whereas before I'd be like, oh, yeah. Yeah, I'll sit back and then I'll look at, do I really want to do this? Is this something I have the time and the capacity and the energy and the intention and the desire to do? And the resources? Yeah? Because sometimes it is. And sometimes I do want to do something because it brings me joy. Whereas other times I'm just doing it out of people pleasing, and that's not helpful. Buddhism teaches us that everything is constantly changing, including our feelings, our body, our emotions. This anicca can help us. Yeah. But a lot of deeply ingrained patterns, anybody notice that they're harder to change? Yeah. Some of them are really harder to change. And so being patient with ourselves, being really kind and patient with ourselves, we'll see, and celebrating the many little improvements, right, will add to the bucket, the wholesome bucket. And know that this habit is impermanent. at least for this, may continue through this lifetime, but eventually, if we live enough lifetimes, we won't have this conditioned habit anymore, right? We're deactivating it right now. It's interesting, Buddhism teaches us that there is no self to improve. There is no separate, fixed self. With that, we understand this, we can detach from a lot of things. But on the mundane level, there is a self. We have a personality, we have tendencies, we have genetic DNA programming, we have conditioning from our family. On a mundane level, there is a self, right? On the ultimate reality is there is no self. We're this constantly evolving, changing, spacious awareness that's going through experience, So it can be really helpful to, when we meditate a lot, to experience our selflessness, experience the spaciousness and the emptiness and the connection to others and to all life forms. This helps us not take everything so seriously. And there are a lot of habits when we awaken that drop away. So the more we can meditate and have levels of awakening, greed drops away eventually if we continue practicing. Desire to change, fear, comparing mind, all the negative mental states eventually drop away. And then we can just be present. Until then, we practice. And I think it's really, really, really important to practice compassion and kindness, right? And patience. Treating ourselves with kindness and compassion, and having the wisdom to know things that can't change. How do we know that? They haven't changed, right? The things that don't change, from what I understand, are your personality. You're stuck. You're stuck with that personality. The things that you find funny, you're going to tend to find funny the rest of your life. The things that interest you, some people are more into artistic endeavors. Some people love philosophy or mathematics and engineering or whatever. Those tendencies are going to stay. I'm not going to wake up tomorrow and be a Picasso because I want to be. Maybe I will, but that hasn't been my experience. The other way that Buddha taught that we want to purify our mind. So he talked about purifying your mind through daily meditation practice, intensive meditation practice. How do we do that? Like I've been talking. Every time the angry mind or an unwholesome mental state comes up, you bring awareness to it, you bring compassion and understanding to it, you see it clearly. That pattern gets weaker and weaker and weaker. Yeah. The other way is through practicing the ethical practices, right? Like Wallace was talking about last week, do no harm, the 5 precepts. We practice not harming killing ourselves or others. We just practice treating all living beings with respect and not harming them in any way, including ourselves. And these virtues lead to greater mental states of compassion and honesty, and they change our behavior, right? So when we come on a difficult situation, we're not going to go in yelling at other people who are already upset. We're going to want to deactivate the anger and bring kindness to the situation because we're practicing that every day, right? So we change in that way. And when we practice mindfulness, we will learn from our mistakes, right? I know when I act unskillfully, like this past week, and my 3-year-old granddaughter was there, I said a curse word in front of her. Life's a bitch or something like that. And my daughter went, because she doesn't want me to curse. She said, she's a little puppet. She repeats everything. And I was, so I was like, oh, sorry. I'll do better. I'll try to do better. And I did. So every time I wanted to, use an exclamation point word, I chose not to. So we can learn from our mistakes, but we're going to make mistakes. Yeah. And then the other way to help is to develop good habits, right? And I'd love to hear some of the good habits you've developed. I know for me, I've developed a lot of good habits of meditating regularly, exercising to take care of the body, surrounding myself with beautiful, positive, inspiring people. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that you can do to develop good habits. So you're not just letting go of the negative habits, you're replacing them with positive habits. Yeah. So I'm sure we could go on and on, but I'm going to stop here. Here's Self-Observation Without Judgment by Donna Folds. Release the harsh and pointed voice. It's just a throwback to the past and holds no truth about this moment. Let go of self-judgment, the old learned ways of beating yourself up for each imagined inadequacy. Allow the dialogue within the mind to grow friendlier and quiet. Shift out of inner criticism and life suddenly looks very different. I can say this only because I make the choice 100 times a day to release the voice that refuses to acknowledge the real me. What's needed here isn't more prodding toward perfection, but intimacy. Seeing clearly and embracing what I see. Love, not judgment. Sow the seeds of tranquility and change. So thank you all for listening. Thank you.
That was wonderful.
Oh, good. All right, so